So some of you may have already attended the previous webinar on version 1 of Indigo Studio. So I may not be going too much in detail with everything with version 1 does, because what version 2 has is everything with version 1, but much more. So let's get started. So when we actually conceived of Indigo Studio as a prototyping solution, we really wanted to offer a way out of this deliverables game where you are busy creating wireframes, annotating wireframes, but they still remain these static compositions which neither the user can evaluate nor your stakeholders can evaluate. More importantly, we wanted to get everyone out of this game of presenting and more in terms of evaluating in context on devices for the stories you're trying to design for with users. So just to give a brief summary of what version 1 was, we released it on 29th of November last year. We have over 46,000 downloads. We were awarded a finalist on the Jolt Awards by Dr. Dobbs. And if you have been following us on Twitter at Indigo Design, you would see that people have been generally very positive about what Indigo has to offer and how it differentiates itself from all the other prototyping solutions out there. So in version 1, I'm trying to reuse the graphic which I had introduced, which was really trying to boil down the essence of Indigo Studio. And it brought together three things. One was the capability to draw your own screens using UI elements or widgets, adding interactions such that you can say when the user clicks on something, what should happen and to design that particular state. And on top of all that, a very minimal and simplified experience for adding transitions. So that is the three pieces which kind of came together: drawing, interaction, and transitions. So on top of that, we actually had added the ability to help tell or experience better user stories. And that's what kind of it wraps these three things: the drawing, interaction, and transitions are wrapped in a user story. And you could actually do more than one story. It's not just about one story of use. You can actually prototype multiple stories of use. Hold on, somebody just told me that they can't hear me, so let me just check it out. I'm just checking my microphone. Audio. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So I'm just gonna rewind just a little bit. Go from there. So in the interest of people who may have not heard me the first time, I'm just going to say that version 1 actually brought together the three core pieces of Indigo, which was the ability to draw your user interfaces, add interactions, and also add transitions to actually create these kind of animated transitions on screen. On top of that, what we also allowed was to help tell better user stories. And these three elements, which are core to Indigo Studio, basically help you tell and experience a great user story. And you don't actually have to do just one story. You could actually layer multiple stories into the same prototype to actually tell a larger use case or a story of use. So what about version 2 and how does it kind of relate to version 1? So version 2 has everything version 1 has plus much more. And here's where the capabilities lie. In the drawing department, if I can call that, we now have support for a viewport and a canvas. So earlier on, when you were version 1 users would have seen that you have to actually set the screen size. And now we have broken those constructs into two pieces. One is the viewport, as what the device or what the target resolution might be, and the concept of a canvas, which could be larger than the viewport. So you can have 1024 by 768 as your viewport, and you can have a canvas which is as long or as wide as your content. Then we added the capabilities to show device chromes. And although it looks like a superficial thing, but I'll show you shortly that device chromes are also a way in which we tell Indigo Studio that you're actually designing for iPhone, iPad, or some kind of a generic phone or tablet device. And we also wanted to accelerate the ability to create iOS prototypes, and for that we added the iOS pack. And the iOS pack is, again, everything which Essentials had, but customized for iOS. And it also adds to it some specific controls which we only find on iOS. And the idea is for you to be able to design iOS prototypes really quickly. On the interaction side, now we have gestures. All the common gestures you would expect to use on mobile devices, like swipe, tap and hold, double tap, those kind of gestures are now built into Indigo. So now if you were always hoping to do some cool swipe-based animation or transition, you can do that. And finally, well, not finally, just before final, we added the ability to do screen-to-screen transitions. So earlier on in Indigo Studio, in version 1, in order to create some kind of a sliding screens in iPhone or iPad, you actually had to do it manually, in the sense like you have the timeline to achieve that goal, and you have fine-grained control into how the elements appear and so on and so forth. But with screen-to-screen transitions, it's kind of built into the product itself. So all you have to do is from this screen, go to another screen, and how should that happen? You just say push or crossfade or slide up or slide down. You can do those kind of transitions. So these are kind of features which are core to the product, which is like the drawing, interaction, and transition. We have expanded on each of these areas. On top of that, we now have export to PDF. This was like a much requested feature from people who are trying to create documents out of their prototypes. And this was an interesting feature for us to implement because we now do a flow-by-flow export of your PDF. So it just does not look like a dump of all the screens you've done. It actually makes sense even when you're reading the PDF. And of course, version 2 also means fewer bugs. And I know most people don't recognize that value, but because you guys have been using it so frequently, a lot of you have been awesome and have been reporting these great bugs for us. And it's become like a nice game for us to hunt it down because we never can predict how people might exactly use it. We have a good sense, but as we actually are conversing with you, we kind of learn more about what you guys do, how you guys are trying to approach the prototyping problem, and it gives us more information to actually design better. But of course, although we are adding all these capabilities, versions 2 is still minimal and still fast. We have tried our best to retain what was core to Indigo, was get out of your way and not hog the entire interface with toolbars as much as possible. And that remains the case, and you will see shortly. So before I go into this one, let me just jump into Indigo Studio and give you a quick demo of the key capabilities I was just talking about. All right. So what you see right now is pretty much how Indigo Studio version 1 looked like, but that's not the whole story. You go about doing your screens or prototype just the way you always did. You pick a screen, click on it. So when you actually pick a new screen, what you now see is what we call a viewport picker. And in here, you see options like generic browser, iPad, generic tablet, iPhone, and a generic phone. What this allows you to do is quickly, if you want to create an iPhone prototype, you just select iPhone. And what it does is it puts this device shell right around your prototype. And if you want to select something else, for example, if you want to design for a browser prototype, we give you a minimal browser, which can be used to frame your design. And the beauty of doing this particular approach is, like, let me go back to iPhone. When you run your prototype, it will be shown inside the iPhone shell. And this will be the case even when you share your prototypes after you're done with it. Your users will see it if they're viewing these iPhone prototypes in their browser on their desktop. They'll see the iPhone shell around it. But if they actually view it on their phone, they actually just see the app itself without this device shell, and we take care of all that stuff. But some of you may not be very fond of having this iPhone shell on top, and we have a solution for that. You can just adjust the transparency of it so you can actually show the viewport, I mean the device shell, as opaque as you like it to be or as faded out as you like it to be. So it completely depends on you how you want to approach this kind of problem. And of course, you can actually do a different device. So for example, I pick a generic device. This is the generic phone. And you can actually change the viewport to make it a bigger. And most of the custom viewport sizes for your Android devices are already built in. So all you need to do is pick from one of our predefined sizes, and the device kind of scales accordingly. I can show you here. You can make your ginormous Samsung phones, and if that's your taste, you can do that right now. So that's just about the viewport. Of course, you can still do the change to orientation. You can design for landscape or portrait. But now let me talk a little bit more about, so you got the sense of what the device shell aspect looks like. But now what did we do special for iOS, right? So now if you pick an iOS device, you might have noticed the Chrome changing. But another thing you might have or may have noticed is that the toolbox is now different. Different in the sense that now we have two packs in here. Originally, when we shipped version 1, we shipped with what we call the Essentials pack. And this is what you guys are familiar with. But when you pick an iPhone as your device target, this pack automatically switches to iOS. Now, the iOS pack, it may look cosmetic, but we really have geared it to make your prototyping experience for iOS really fast. And here's how we do it. So for example, you want to mock up a simple iOS screen which has a header and a toolbar and some tabs and so on and so forth. All you need to do is just pick the header element, drag it in, and we automatically show a drop target for you. So you don't actually have to worry about positioning it, just drop it in there. Same thing for toolbars. You see a drop target at the base of the phone. There, done, right? And also we have some specialized controls for iOS, and those are like the page control. And I'm just going to lay it out here, and I'll use it in one of the prototypes I'm going to build shortly. The tab control, same thing here. You can just snap it in place. And these tabs are live tabs, just like our other tab controls are, and you can change the icon by double-clicking on it, or just pick icon in the toolbox, in the properties panel. So I can find a different icon and it replaces it there. If you want to change the text, you just start typing finger, right? So I just select it and I say finger. That's it. So that's how simple it is to do. And as I said, these are live tabs, and what that means is if I add a button to this particular tab, I select a different one and add something else. And I'm also showing you some of the button styles we already have predefined. You see, you don't actually have to create a new screen or a new state just to simulate these kind of real tabs, right? Just get rid of the tabs for now. And just rescale. All right. So the other thing I wanted to show you was when I pop the header in, and some of the custom buttons which you constantly find in iOS, for example, navigation buttons or action buttons, we also take care of that. So you see the style in here which says back, and there's a drop target which automatically appears. I just drop it in there. It's positioned correctly. Same thing with edit is in there. But that's not the complete story. You might be wondering about what about different styles for like the action buttons. That's taken care of. You just select the button and you see this option called type. You pick and there you go. All your icon types are in there. You just have to select and then we kind of style it for you. You can of course override it, make your changes, no problem. So these are all the smaller controls we have, and most of the things are what you find in iOS. So for example, what we call the icon button is this. The size is automatically picked for you because we know what iOS requires. And same thing, you can pick a different style for it. And most of the common ones like adding a new contact, delete, detail disclosure, row insert, all these styles are in there. And as I'm hovering over it, you can see that we automatically change it in the design surface for you, right? And of course, you have your switches, badge control, same thing. Anything which has a different style, it's automatically in there. You can just pick. Right? So now let me talk about some of our special controls, right? So let me just delete the stuff for now. Pick a different style here, say edit. So I already talked about the pager control, which is one of our special content control types. So just get it again from toolbox. So the pager control, the beauty of the pager control is that you can actually set multiple images to that and have an image gallery done pretty much with very minimal effort. So I can just say set multiple images. I can go to my pictures gallery, and if I have some pictures for you, well, I only have my mugshot. So if I say open, okay, it actually adds it in there. And when you run the screen, you actually have the swipe gesture already built in, and you can choose to show or hide that option. You don't actually have to do anything special for the pager control. So enough of my mug. And let me show you something what we call, it's very special to Indigo Studio, what we call segmented tabs. And if you're using iOS, you would have found this control very commonly used. They're literally tabs, but they look like a segmented toggle. But we do it something slightly different. You see I'm dragging it in, and I'm going to add it into the header here. But the beauty is that we can have the content area completely separate from the segmented toggle. So you can actually create any kind of special layout, but this still behaves like a real tab. So for example, I can add action button 1 and select the second one, action button 2, and there you go. It behaves just like a real tab both during design time and also when you run it. There you go. So on top of that, let me just remove all this just to show you another trick. We actually have some predefined themes. So when we looked at iOS 6, when we were looking at it, there were 3 themes which iOS kind of did for their, for example, for their mail client, for iTunes, and for some of the other custom apps they actually ship with. And for us, it's just a matter of switching the theme, and then anything you drag in matches that theme automatically. How cool is that, right? So you actually don't have to worry about it. And even if you change your mind, that's not a problem. You can actually still change that theme later. So we are still in good territory in this case. So you see the theme options and the properties, and I can just change it at any time I like. So I can have a local override on top of the themes. Right. So let me just pull up my slide once again just to reorient you as to what the capabilities were. So as I said, I just talked about the viewport and the canvas stuff. I showed you what the device chromes were. I gave you a brief introduction of what the iOS pack was. Now, in order to show you gestures and stuff, I actually have to build something. And that's not a problem because with Indigo Studio, our goal is to make something really quickly. So I'm going to try mocking up a sample screen for not a car maintenance app, for an expense app. And you'll find this expense app actually on our website under our showcase samples. So you can actually play with it at your own time. So with this experience, what I'm going to do is while I'm creating the prototype, I'm going to use both the concept of gestures and also introduce you to how our screen-to-screen transitions work. All right, so let's do that. So on the expense app, I just need a header. So I'm just going to do it all gray just for fun. As my header, and I call it expense. And all I'm doing is I'm selecting the header and just typing directly in here. And we also have some easy pre-baked list styles which you can use to get started. So for example, if you're doing a mail app, I can just drag this in here and it's automatically takes care of it. And I can just repeat this to create more elements. And you can always customize it. I can just go in here and change that to something else. And I can change the color to blue. And that's already taken care of because it's just a style of our repeater. We have based this control on top of our repeater control, which some of you guys might have already been familiar with, right? So I'm going to select a simple repeater because I wanted to create a base element for the stuff. Uh, so let's do that. So I'm just creating the zones of the repeater. And in here, I'm going to add a button. So alt click and alt drag still work. So I'm just going to use that approach. So I go button, I say add transaction. I'm not trying to make it too pretty for you guys. And now I'm just going to create a template. I say coffee. Go. I'm going to add an icon. I just hit enter. Once I added the icon, I look for a mug, I suppose. Yeah, there you go. A coffee, and then I can say, oops. I just say God. I'm going to do. So another thing we have done is, yes, we have two packs which we have shipped with this control, with this release. One was the Essentials pack and one was the iOS pack. But when you actually use the alt-click approach or the alt-drag approach to add elements, you can still get access to your Essentials pack. So if I want the title from the Essentials pack, I can just select titles and I can say it's Starbucks, right? So it's really expensive. So $5.65. Well, that's cheap. I just add it in here. And then I'll just give it a border style. So we can always do custom borders. I just need border on the bottom. And there you go. I created my expense list. I'm going to add an icon here for another trick I want to show. So I'm just going to alt click, icon, look for gear, which I want to simulate settings for this particular app. All right. Now, so I got my basic list. Let me do something more fun. So let me just go into the template again and add another icon. And this time I'm going to use the icon for trash. I'll leave it here. I'm going to add another one on this side. But you see, now it's a great example of saying what we're using transparency, so I at least can still see my icon, which I'm hiding behind it. But since if the moment I find this is getting in my way, I can adjust the transparency of this thing. So I'm going to do that shortly. But let me just add my icon. That's my edit icon. All right, awesome. All right, so this guy, transparency. Boom. There you go. So I like my screen a little bit more minimal, so I'm doing that. So now I'm going to show you first the concept of a screen-to-screen transition. And what I want to do is when I click on settings, I want the screen to flip and show me settings. So the same process, like in version 1, I say add an interaction. When the user taps the gears, I'm going to rename the settings. I say navigate to screen in project. Now, I haven't created the screen for settings yet, but that's the beauty of Indigo. You can actually design as you add interactions without having to think about it. So now I know the reason why the settings screen exists. What this really helps you do is the moment you're done wireframing, you're also done prototyping. So let me just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to call it settings. That's my name. I'm going to give it screen. I said create. Boom. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick a header and I call it, now I'm in the settings area. I'm going to add an edit button right here. And this time I'm going to call it done because I want it to flip back to the other guy. And the same thing I'm going to do with our special content list styles I showed you. There were 3 types we introduced. One was the content list, which simulates the email client. Then there's the icon list, which shows an icon and text, and then the simple list. So I'm just going to use the icon list here. So as you can see, we just borrowed from the iOS settings panel. And that's not a problem because I can just say, I can just type directly and change it, expense limits. If I want to change the icon, just double click on it. I can find some other icon. It's as simple as that. If I don't want to check a switch in here, I can remove the switch. The switches are live switches, by the way, so you can set it at design time. I can just tap on it to on off. I can also change its color if that matters to your app. As simple as that. So now I have created an interaction from the first one. So I'm just going to name the screen. Let me call this the overview. The overview screen. There's the settings screen. And when I hit done, when the user taps on done, navigate to screen and project, same process. I say go back to overview. Now is the beauty part. This is where our screen-to-screen transitions come in. It actually shows you here when the user taps done, navigate to this particular screen. And right now, by default, we added a push transition because that's the most common transition people experience in iOS, but I can totally change it. And we give you a little micro animation in here to show what the push feels like. And this time I'm going to choose to flip, right? And I'm going to say flip from left, then that's fine. Let me go here. And this one, I'm going to edit this interaction. And this one also defaults set to push. I can just say flip from the other side. Now, that's all I did for my transitions. And I actually have two screens created. One is the overview, and the other is the setting. I'm going to run my screen. There you go. It's as simple as that to create some flip transitions or screen-to-screen transitions in Indigo. Now let's go back and show you what swipe could potentially do, right? So now I'm going to talk about the state-based transitions, and that's what I'm going to do. For the first one, I say on this item, let me call it coffee, not coffee, coffee, and I say add an interaction, and this time you can see that in addition to the common desktop-based gestures, and we actually control what we show you inside this dropdown based on the target platform you've selected. Since you've already selected iPhone, we know that you're trying to do for mobile, and we offer you taps, double taps, presses and holds, and swipes. So I'm going to use a swipe. I'm going to say when you swipe left on coffee, change the screen to a new state. So now I'm in a new state, and what Indigo expects you to do is what would you like to see here, or what changes would you like to show up? So remember that on the template, I actually created something much bigger. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just say select everything, and you see I also selected some invisible things, and I'm just going to move it left. Right? And I can also, you see all the changes were recorded. I can just select those guys. I'm just shift selecting, giving it a duration. Then I'm going to go back to my original state, and I'm going to say I have swipes left over applied. I'm going to add another one, and this time I'm going to do swipes right. And see, we automatically detect that you actually have a left defined, so we kind of disable that. So swipe right is the next option. Change the screen to a new state. And in that state, I just select I do the same business I did last time. Move it to the right. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm just going to give it a duration. So what did I really achieve here? I'm going to show you. So you guys might already be familiar with our Interactions Explorer. So as and when I'm adding an interaction, we show a mini popover, a mini navigator which shows up here. This guy, and it actually shows you whenever a new state got added. So right now what it's showing you is that it has three interactions added on here. One is a navigate interaction, which is this green tag, and it's going to the settings page or the settings screen. And then I have two states in here. It's not very visible, so I'm just going to expand it. And there you go. You can automatically see from the start state, I have two. One is swipes left over. I just clicked on the arrow to basically toggle that mode where I can actually just read it. But you actually don't need that overlay per se, because Indigo, as you already know, we automatically name your states based on what you do. So this one says swiped left, which was the interaction, over coffee. Coffee was the name of the element I gave to that. So swipe left over coffee shows you this one. Swipes right over coffee shows you this one. Not as much fun. Now I'm going to attempt something which is not wise because it's really meant for touch. I'm going to simulate with the mouse. It still works, but I'm going to show you anyway. So here's my first element. So this was the same interaction. So as you say that, as you can see, I added a screen-to-screen transition, and then I added a state-based transition all together on the same prototype, and they play perfectly well without destroying each other. Here you go. I swipe right. There's my delete. And if you swipe back, we automatically reverse that for you. You actually don't have to specify that because we know that when you swipe left, something appears. We understand that when you swipe back in the opposite direction, you want it to go away. And that's already taken care of. So there you go. Now back on the original start state, I swipe the other way. I get my edit. Now the beauty of all that is now I can actually add interactions from that state onwards. So let's do the edit flow. So I'm just going to tap it in. This is my edit state. And I want to say from here, when I add an interaction, I want to see some kind of an interface which will let the user add their transaction or add a new transaction. So let's do that. I say add an interaction, and I can say, again, I can do navigate, screen in project, and let me call it an add transaction screen. And that automatically creates a new screen for me, picks the viewport because they already know that in this project I'm doing an iPhone. So let's do that. So in this case, I'm going to use our so-called pager control. I'm going to put it in here, just resize it. And in there, I'm just going to create some icons. So I'm going to use a repeater. And I say an icon. Just with a random image icon. Yeah, that's fine. So one thing which you may have not realized about the repeater can also repeat rows, but also columns. So right now it's in the vertical layout. If I switch it to horizontal, so that's horizontal. So when I double tap into it, you see it shows it like this because that's what I wanted. Select these two guys, make it a little bigger. There you go. And these are my so-called, categories. And now I can just repeat this way. How cool is that? Right? And now I can go to the next page, so I can just copy this guy, what I just created. Just the whole thing. Let's make it. I don't need that the border around the repeater, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So I can select the second pager and dump this guy in here. And just so that you know it's different, I'm just gonna make this a different color so you can see. And let's add a cancel so we can go back to our original one. And you see the pager also moves independently, so you can actually position it any way you like. Let's say I can add it back here. And same thing, as I add an interaction, navigate to screen project, and I'm going to pick the overview screen. And I'm just going to say, give it a direction, right? So overview. So now let me run the prototype. So as you can see, if I show you the Interactions Explorer again, it's actually showing me that from swipe right over coffee, I actually added an interaction, add transaction, and it navigates to that one. So when I run the screen, hopefully everything should work. Same thing, done flip. Now I'm going to click on the edit operation, and it actually slides in. And this is my pager I created. And you can actually have some kind of a transaction. And if you actually look at our samples, if you have downloaded recently, this application is actually available in here, where you can actually see how it would look in higher fidelity, and all the stuff. Same thing. This is what I was trying to simulate, but I just didn't have time to make it pretty. for our demo today, right? So let me go back to the project. And you can actually just tap on it to open that screen also. So that basically shows you how you can add the swipe-based interactions, add screen-to-screen transitions, all in one fluid sweep. You don't actually have to think about it separately. It's just works with the way Indigo traditionally worked, and we kind of woven these new features without breaking what you already know about Indigo. So the another thing you might have not noticed by now, and this is a cool thing, is that the preview, it is actually in a separate window. Maybe some of you have already know about it, but the preview is both HTML and it runs in a separate window. So for all you folks who like doing stuff on multiple monitors, I know I do, you can actually have your prototype on a separate monitor, have your design surface on a different monitor, and make changes. Like that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to say, go back to the overview screen. I'm just going to make everything bold and make the icon a different color, right? So now you can see that this is reflected on the design surface. Since I'm doing it on the same monitor, I have to switch this way. All you need to do is just hit refresh, and it's already taken care of. You don't actually have to do run screen again. So that's the kind of cool thing, that you can actually have it running simultaneously, right? So that gives you a sense of the core features I talked about earlier. And let me just bring that slide up again, if I can find it. No, it's not what I wanted. Okay, something went amiss. Wow, I have a lot of junk open up. All right. So what I was trying to show you was the concept of viewport and canvas, device and chromes, the iOS pack. But what I really focused on right now was on the gestures and the new interaction capabilities we added, and also the new transition or the baked-in elements, which was the screen-to-screen transition. And of course, another important piece to our story was this export to PDF, and that's what I'm going to quickly show you right now. So if I go back into Indigo, so these are the three screens I created, and it has some states and it has some flows. So if I show you, you will see that there are a couple of flows in here and a couple of navigate actions. So I can just go here to my project home, which shows my three screens. I can just say export all and just pick as PDF, and we automatically name stuff for you. So let's just call it webinar prototype. And it's going to default to my desktop. So I'm just going to say export to PDF, and it just exports on the fly. And you can actually still interact with your interface. It doesn't lock your interface in any way. So while the export is going on, you can actually continue doing your designs. And if you just say show in Finder, there's my desktop. So I'm just going to find that one, webinar prototype. And there you go. We automatically create this table of contents for you depending on the flow we had. So if I now want to present this to someone, I can just say full screen and I can go. First screen you see, this is the swipe one. See, on the top left corner, we automatically name it for you. It says overview, swipe left over coffee, go this one. Then you go back to overview, you swipe right over coffee, you see that guy. When you click on settings, you get this one. When you click on add transaction, you see this screen. So automatically we take care of the fact that there was a flow in your prototype, and we try to respect it. It's not very apparent on this particular prototype, but if you take a little bit more complex prototype, and let me see if I can find one. Let's see if this works. No, this is not the one I wanted. Just gonna open. These are old stuff. Okay, let's pick this one, right? So this, if I show you the Interactions Explorer for this particular screen, you would know what I mean by I've added more interactions and more longer stories in each of these things. So this is my Interactions Explorer for this one. And you can clearly see how I have actually designed this particular prototype. And I actually simulated, for example, from the start screen, when you swipe left over, you saw delete. You actually tap on delete, an item gets deleted. Then you swipe on the next item, same thing, delete. I tapped on delete. So there's a flow which starts from this guy from the start screen and ends on this one, right? So with the PDF export, I can either come to my Interactions Explorer, simply right click and say export, in which case that flow gets exported by itself, or I can just come back to my home screen and I can take a quick peek at the flow map we have, and you can automatically see that these are the macro interactions I have. From the launch screen, it goes to the money app home screen, and from there I can go to two places. I can go to the expense overview screen or to the settings screen. If I say export all and I say PDF, something wrong with my mouse, my money, and it automatically defaults to the project folder, but I just want to dump it on the desktop, so I'm going to do that. And I can say export. And while you're exporting your PDFs, if you have some annotations, which you use the annotation tool on the design surface, it'll also export it alongside it. So we'll show both the designs and any notes you might have placed on your prototype in the PDF export you do. And that can be pretty handy if you have a workflow where you're actually using annotation quite heavily to actually converse with some other stakeholders who are not, who you're not able to demo stuff directly to, right? So while this is exporting, what I also wanted to show you was we enhanced, and some of you already know about it, our private share. So traditionally, when you do share prototype, you had the option of sharing on our service. By our service, I mean Infragistics service. And that was a really fast way to get this prototype into the hands of the users. So when you say share your prototype on our service, it basically creates a simple link. So I'm going to try doing that right now. So share your prototype, done. And here's a URL. You can copy that, send it to someone, and you open that URL on your device, and you can actually get the running app. And if you are using any of the iOS devices, just add to your home screen, and it kind of hides the browser bars and the browser chromes. I can't show it to you here because I don't have a phone to show you, but it'll actually just simulate the app, provided that you have actually designed bits and pieces of it correctly. But what I really wanted to show you was when I say share prototype, and this time I say share on your servers, it just asks us the Indigo just asks you to pick a folder. And I can say pick a folder. And that's what I've been doing. This is my Dropbox. I just go to my public folder because that's where Dropbox allows you to host stuff. And this is like the money app stuff I had done in the past. So I'm going to create a new one. I say webinar prototype. If I can spell. And I say create. I say open and done. Generate. And what this does is actually, I'll show you. It generates these couple of folders for me. One is the assets folder, in which case I have any kind of images I might have used is automatically added for you. And it just has one index.html file and a player. If you want to host it on like Google Drive or some other kind of a web server, just have to make sure that all three things are in there. And when you launch index.html, it just launches the prototype in your browser. There you go. And as I told you before, since I picked iPhone and I'm viewing it inside the browser, I can actually see the device shell around it. But if I'm looking at this on my device, I won't see these things, right? Another advantage of doing this kind of a local export is that you really have offline prototypes of sorts, right? So when you're doing a presentation, you can just export these folders, put it on your flash drive, and you're good to go. You'll never have to worry about internet connection or anything of that sort. You can actually demo your prototypes pain-free, right? So let me just go back to the PDF export. Sorry for that distraction. So this is the prototype I just exported. I showed you that each of these screens have more complicated flows in them. So this is another screen. And it's complicated because I decided to add so many interactions because I wanted to create a kind of an experience. So you see, this is the money app, the launch screen. So this was our biggest challenge for PDF export. Like, how do we take the effort away from you to create this stuff. Now, if you're on a Mac or some kind of a or even a Windows machine, once you export a PDF, you can still rearrange it in the table of contents. So that kind of creativity is still available to you. But we try to solve some of your effort. And what we did was, this is my Money PDF. And it automatically creates that flow and tries to respect it. So what basically this shows is from the launch, your first interaction took you to the Money app. That's what I call my first screen. And whatever you name your screen or whatever the states are named, that's how we are actually naming in the table of contents. But if you go into your prototype, so this is the expense overview screen, I can just change the state name to something else. And whatever makes sense to you, you can do that. If you feel that this auto naming is not working for you, for most purposes it should. But if it doesn't, you can just override it. And what will happen is when you export the PDF, it takes care of it. It actually just borrows whatever text you have provided, and it just populates the table of contents for you. So now if I want to demo my prototype using a PDF, I just say view at a full screen mode. And there you go. I can say, this is the first screen. The user launches the screen and it comes to this one, taps on an expense, gets to add an expense, picks coffee, adds a coffee, and you go back, the coffee is added. Same thing they can do, they can go back, add a transaction, add a different category, shopping, gets added, you go back into shopping. This is when you swipe left over an item, you delete it, the item goes away. You swipe on left over an item again, you hit delete, that item also goes away. So as you see, even I'm just using my arrow keys on my PDF, but because I created this prototype, I'm able to narrate the story in this prototype, right? And now this is when it's going to the next screen. You tapped on month, you picked a different month as June, it switches it out, go back, July, and this is a state I had created to show what part of the interface has not been designed yet. But that's basically the flow. You see, I can just go back and forth and I can get the same feel of how it would be in static. So this is our best effort right now. And of course, we would like to improve it based on any kind of feedback you guys might have. But that's the PDF export feature. So now we have 10 minutes remaining. So I'm just going to go back and finish up on this part. So hopefully you've seen that we have tried to retain as much of the Indigo Studio 1, which you love, in Indigo Studio version 2. But at the same time, we have added those core capabilities, which will make you even faster when you try to do prototypes for mobile devices. But some things still hold true, irrespective of the tool. It doesn't matter on Indigo Studio. You could be using Xure or whatever it is. You really have to think about prototypes in terms of the story of use. Like there's a goal, and the user has to do certain things to reach that goal. And this could be a single story of use. You can have a little bit more complex story of use where things are branching off, but they're still attempting the same goal. You could even have people branching off and achieving two separate goals. So like adding a transaction could be a goal. Checking your monthly expenses could be another goal in that expense tracking app. But that's all good because there's a clear goal you're letting the users progress towards. What you don't want to do is create these kind of prototypes which go nowhere. At the same time, you have this gazillion goals you're trying to squeeze into one prototype. But if you want to stay agile, you really need to focus more on story-centered prototypes that you're discussing a user story. You start the discussion, you immediately prototype, maximum 3 or 4 hours, and you should be able to test, like you prototype in the morning, test in the afternoon, or prototype today, test tomorrow. But if you can be that agile, I think any prototyping tool would really help the process you're running, right? So now I'm going to just look at our questions, if you have some. But I just want to summarize, you can always follow us on Indigo Design. We tweet heavily, and we are always looking for people to communicate with us. Of course, if you have any issues in the product itself, let me show you that part. You just go to menu, help and about, and we have the same options here. Like you can follow us on Twitter, submit a new user voice idea. Of course, you guys have ideas, and some of you have been submitting tons of it, so we are very thankful for that. You can just get support from here, and also explore any kind of help topics Indigo Studio currently has. And we have really fleshed out our help. We have new how-to videos. I can just show you right now. Um, so these are all new how-to videos which are available on our Indigo Studio help site, specialized for the new release. So things about iOS pack, you can always review those things under designing for mobile, and all those videos in there, right? Of course, you can download our 30-day trial for version 2, and on our website. And any new ideas, or if you're curious about our roadmap, like what are we working on next, user voice, indigostudio.uservoice.com is usually a good place for you to find, what people have been talking about, what people are voting on, and if you have any new idea, how much traction there is with other users like yourself, right? So I'm just going to our website, and if you scroll all the way down, it says check our sample prototypes. All of these have been created in Indigo. We have faked it. It's the target resolution, so it should look perfectly fine on your devices.